Hello, and thank you for joining me. I thought it would be very helpful if I posted a repeat, I guess, of part of what I tried to show you last night, because when I reviewed the video, I went ahead and uploaded it, mistakes and all, but when I reviewed it, I did a lot of things off screen, so I'm going to try to stay within camera range today, and I appreciate your patience. So last night, what we made was this little flower right here. And I start this flower. Well, let me talk about the supplies that you're going to need. You're going to need old book pages. You're going to need some type of ink. I used Tim Holtz Distress ink from Ranger. I used purple acrylic paint. This was in a little art skills kit that I bought at a drugstore here in town. By the way, I live in a little town called Hiawassee, Georgia. It's up in the mountains, tiny little place, but we're growing every day. I used old book pages to cut squares out of. Now you can raid your book stash if you have one. You can go to a thrift store and buy old books. That's a great source because they're cheap, $1 a piece, usually $2. Your flower size is going to be predicated by the size of your book page. Now my book page was relatively small, so that meant that my squares had to be 4 by 4. Some of the other things that I used a little finger ink dauber. You just slide it on your finger, and I got this from Heartfelt Creations. They've got some really nice dies to use in your Sizzix machines, your Big Shots, those kinds of things. They've got some super nice dies there. And then I use Fabri-Tac. I love Fabri-Tac. I think I said that about 1,000,000 times last night. It is easier for me to work with than some of the other glues that are on the market, simply because it takes a little while for it to dry, so it gives me time to get things in the position that I want them, because I never, ever get things where I want them the first time. That just is not going to happen with me. So if you're like me, go to Walmart, get you some Beacon Fabri-Tac. You can order it on Amazon also, or visit your neighborhood craft store. Be sure to shop local if you can. I'm a big proponent of that. Our small businesses need to stay in business, especially in today's business climate. So buy local when you can. Okay, I've preached enough. Here are 2 of my petals. We're going to make one today because I probably did that off camera too. So here are my petals. And remember, I told you I start out with a 4-inch square old book page. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a triangle. Now, if you're like me, you can't cut straight to save your soul, but you know, that just means that your petals are going to be a little wonky. And guess what? Nature's wonky, so who cares? All you're interested in is coming up with a colorful, pretty flower that you have made, because creating things gives us such a satisfaction. So now I'm folding that triangle into a second smaller triangle. And I'm just going to even it up a little bit. And I always like to drag my fingernails across the edges just to make them nice and crisp. If you're working with really old book pages, you might not ought to do that. The paper might be too delicate to do that. Now we're going to bring our points together, and we're going to fold this down into our last triangle shape. Okay? So there is the basis for my petal. For each flower like these, you need 3 triangles. So you do this process 3 more times. Now, here's where I always had such problems in making these things. Some ladies asked me where I learned to do this. I found a thing on Pinterest that had some in-depth pictures, and I can't remember now. It was something about 30 ways to use old book pages or something like that. And they had pictures, and what I learned was, if your fold faces you and the point is pointing down, you got a point going this way and a point going this way, But this side right here has no open pages. It's just folds. If you start cutting right there, you're going to come out with the type of flower that you need, which is this one, okay? If you do what I always did, and because I don't make notes on things, I could never remember what I did wrong, I would start cutting here, and my flower petals would just fall apart. That's not what you want. You want the point of your fold pointing toward you, in my case, toward my big fat tummy, and you want your fold pointing toward the right, okay? Now, if this was my first flower, I would cut along here. And I would probably stop about right here because you don't want to cut all the way down into that point because, again, everything's going to fall apart. We're making paper dolls here. If you remember cutting the little girls out and they were all holding hands, we are attempting to make our flower petals hold hands. So, since this is not my first petal, I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to use it as a template. So here's my fold, and I've already cut the tip off, so I'm going to have to kind of guess at it a little bit. But I'm going to push this down and try to get it fairly at the same height. Okay, so you've got your little template here. Now you can either draw around this template if that's easier for you, or you can be brave and you can cut around. Now the best thing in cutting, and I learned this from Laura Walalowski, I think is the way you say her name, on Craftsy, curve your paper, not your scissors. And I have a hard time remembering that sometimes. But it does work better because then you get smoother circles. Okay, I'm going to cut to about right there, okay? And since I've already got this here, I'm going to go ahead and cut this tip off, okay? So we're going to cut that tip off just like that. So now I have 3 flower petals. And by the way, I used my Tim Holtz red-handled scissors. I love my red-handled scissors, and I wish he hadn't changed to the black-handled scissors, because every time you see these used in a video, you know automatically they're Tim Holtz. So to me, that was kind of his signature scissors. But I have a pair. I hope you do too. Okay, so now let me just trim up this jagged little edge right here. Here's the part, this is the part that was completely off screen last night, and I really apologize for that. I'm going to go through how I put my ink on and how I put my paint on, because when I reviewed my video, you couldn't see that at all. So I'm going to try to stay in frame. I'm going to take my Salty Ocean Tim Holtz Distress Ink. I'm going to take my Heartfelt Creations Dauber. You can use anything. If you've got a Q-tip, or if you've got a Tim Holtz inker thing, and I forget what it's called. I just like this. Okay. Now, inking, there's a fine art to inking that I have yet to master. If you start out here and come on to your paper, you don't end up with those ugly sponge circles or splotches. But I get a little carried away, and I always end up with splotches. So what I have started doing on flowers, I'll start in the V part of the petal and then work my way up to the top. Then I'll go to the next V. Now here you can see why you don't go all the way to the point too, because when you cut this off, if you'd gone all the way to the point, your flower petal would fall apart. Okay, back to what we were doing. I'm going to go to the V, and I'm going to come back up and meet my blue ink up here at the top. And right here you can see the beginnings of a splotch, but you don't really notice it because it's in the V of a petal. So to me, that's a good way to kind of start the process of mastering inking. So I'm going to ink around. And on these, if you hold your finger fairly close to the top of the petal, your page won't move. There's an ink splotch, but that's not going to matter by the time we get through, okay? And ink around, and ink around, ink-a-dink-a-dink-a-doo, ink around. And you just ink your way around your flower petal, and you do this to all 3 sets. I'm only going to do 1 set today because it takes a while. And that was the worst part of the video. So this is kind of an addendum to my first video. All right. So we're just about done here. There. Now all my petals have been inked around. Excuse me, my allergies are really acting up. Another thing that I really like to do, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but if you look down through this flower, I inked down what could be kind of considered the veins. And you can sort of see that as you look down through there. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to ink around the little circle. So we're going to come up, and you just hit every V. Be careful and don't tear your pages, because if you tear your petal set, you'll have to start over. Ask me how I know. So you just keep inking. And then the other thing that I'd like to do is to ink around that circle. Okay? Just like that. So our inking for today's purposes is finished. Be sure and put the cap on your ink. Don't dry out that expensive ink. Again, how do I know? I'm the world's messiest crafter. All right, now we're going to use our purple acrylic paint. And again, this was off camera as well. Okay, so let me get my brush here. I'm just using I'm just using a paintbrush that my husband got for me at the local drugstore. They used to sell kind of novelty things in the drugstore, and they had little paint kits, and so he got me these acrylic paints and this paintbrush. Now, what I was trying to tell you last night was that if you will separate the bristles on your brush, you can kind of mimic these tiger stripe things, these zebra stripes or whatever you call them. I really thought that was really pretty, and it kind of made it look like a tiger lily or something to me. Anyway, a fantasy flower. All right, let's see if I can drop the lid again today. I'm going to put me a little bit of paint right there. It doesn't take much, and you can add too, but you can't ever put the paint back in the tube. All right, so we're going to dip our brush. And we got a little bit of separation going on. Okay, now I'm going to tap, 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 tap. It's what I say to myself as I'm doing it. You can say something completely different or nothing at all. Excuse me. Okay, and you just continue to work your way around the flower, adding your paint, and you can add as little or as much as you want. Your flower can be dramatic, it can be subtle, you can skip this step altogether. You can just make the petals and glue them together. You don't have to put any ink on them. They're really pretty by themselves. And then, like I said last night, once you get a bunch of them done up, you can make yourself a mason jar full of beautiful flowers. You can make a bouquet. You can do like I'm planning to do and put them on your door. I don't know what made me come up with that, but I'm going to decorate my studio door. First, I'm going to take it off. I want to paint it turquoise. Just because I like turquoise. I have a turquoise chair that a friend gave me, and I absolutely love it, love it, love it. All right, so now I've got all my petals painted purple, we're going to do some little purple treatments on the veins. Doesn't have to be much, just a little dab. And you just dab, dab, dab. And I hope you can see this better today. It's kind of difficult to do this. Maybe I need a little slant table so that my brush doesn't get in the way of you seeing what I'm doing. I've got something. I'll bring that in the studio for the next time. Okay, so there is the painted flower. Okay? And so once that dries, then you continue on with the process that actually stayed pretty much in frame. Excuse me. Stayed pretty much in frame last night. Oh, my mercy. I am so sorry. So then you would do your other two like this, and you would do the back of them if you wanted to. You don't have to, because 9 times out of 10 what you're looking at is face on at the flower. But if you put it on a floral wire and you do some like this, you might want to have the back painted. Totally up to you. Entirely up to you. I would love to see what you're making. So if you look for me on Facebook, Jennifer Wood Marshall, and post what you've made, that would be so awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in YouTube land again, hopefully without coughing so much. Thank you again. Bye-bye.